In just 47 seconds, the most powerful woman in European politics made a decision that would crack the foundation of her own authority. Ursula von der Leyen didn't wait for consensus. She didn't consult the full commission. She simply authorized a targeted investigation into Alice Weidel's party financing with a single signature on a document marked Priority Action, Democratic Safeguarding Protocol. The cameras in the Berlaymont building captured everything. The European Parliament fell into stunned silence. What did the Commission president unleash that would turn her own institutional weapon against her? I'm standing in the heart of the story that mainstream outlets are scrambling to bury. This isn't about left versus right anymore. This is about power, miscalculation, and the moment when a political attack becomes a suicide mission. The fallout has triggered something nobody in Brussels anticipated. A constitutional crisis that threatens to expose the very mechanisms the EU uses to silence dissent. Exactly 11 days ago at 14:37 Central European Time, von der Leyen convened an emergency session. The official agenda listed campaign finance transparency, but leaked minutes reveal the real topic: neutralizing Alice Weidel before the federal elections. Weidel isn't just another populist. She's an economist, former Goldman Sachs analyst, fluent in Mandarin, living in Switzerland with her female partner. She doesn't fit the convenient narrative, and that makes her dangerous to the establishment. Her party, Alternative for Deutschland, has been polling at 23% nationally. That's not fringe territory. That's kingmaker status. Von der Leyen's strategy was surgical. She instructed the European Public Prosecutor's Office to open an investigation into a $4.7 million contribution cycle that Weidel personally oversaw. The accusation? Russian-linked entities funneling money through Austrian shell companies. On paper, legitimate oversight. In practice, political warfare. The authorization document contained a clause that should alarm every European citizen. Article 7.2 granted investigators power to freeze party assets without judicial review for 90 days. This was financial strangulation timed to cripple AfD's campaign infrastructure 3 months before Germans vote. Internal commission polling drove this decision. Von der Leyen's team knew that if AfD crossed 25%, traditional coalition mathematics would collapse. The calculation was made. Strike now, accept the backlash, hope the media narrative holds. It didn't hold. At exactly 09:18 the following morning, Alice Weidel held a press conference in Berlin that changed everything. She didn't appear defensive, she appeared prepared. She stood at the podium with a black leather folder embossed with the EU flag, and what came next was a masterclass in political judo. Weidel opened with precision that betrayed her Goldman Sachs training. The European Commission has accused my party of financial misconduct involving $4.7 million, she stated, her voice calm and crystalline. I welcome this investigation. In fact, I demand it be expanded. Then she dropped the nuclear option. She revealed her legal team had compiled a parallel dossier documenting irregular disbursements from EU structural funds to German NGOs with explicit political mandates. The room went silent. Cameras focused tighter. Weidel continued, between 2021 and 2024, the European Commission allocated $347 million to 43 civil society organizations operating in Germany. These groups openly campaigned against my party, organized counter-demonstrations, and produced materials explicitly designed to influence electoral outcomes. Under German law, this constitutes illegal foreign interference in domestic elections. She wasn't finished. Weidel presented specific wire transfer codes, dated memoranda, and signed authorization forms bearing the signature of von der Leyen's own Director General for Regional and Urban Policy. The evidence suggested a systematic channel. EU funds designated for democratic resilience programs were being weaponized as a shadow campaign apparatus against Eurosceptic parties across the continent. The backlash was instantaneous. Within 3 hours, Lanarg Who Funds, whom was trending across German social media. By evening, it had spread to France, Italy, and the Netherlands. Political parties that had previously kept quiet about EU institutional overreach suddenly found their voices. Marine Le Pen in Paris, Giorgia Meloni in Rome, and even moderate voices in the European People's Party began asking uncomfortable questions. The real damage came from Karlsruhe. On day 4, the German Constitutional Court announced emergency hearings on AfD's petition challenging the investigation's legality. The unusual speed signaled this wasn't routine. Von der Leyen's response revealed her miscalculation. She doubled down. She invoked Article 7 proceedings against Germany itself, threatening sanctions for systemic threats to rule of law if Karlsruhe interfered. Unprecedented, the Commission was declaring its authority superseded Germany's highest court. The German government fractured immediately. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, already struggling with coalition tensions, found himself trapped. His coalition partners, the Greens and the pro-business FDP, demanded he support Brussels. But his own SPD backbenchers, sensing electoral disaster, began breaking ranks. One senior SPD member of the Bundestag told reporters, "If we let Brussels overrule Karlsruhe, we're not a sovereign nation anymore. We're a province." I obtained access to the internal crisis communications between Berlin and Brussels during this period. The transcripts are extraordinary. German officials pleaded with von der Leyen to withdraw the Article 7 threat. They warned that she was creating a nationalist backlash that would make Brexit look like a minor disagreement. Von der Leyen refused. Her exact words, according to the leaked call, "We cannot allow electoralism to undermine European values. If Germany won't defend those values, the Commission must." That statement, when leaked, became a rallying cry for every EU skeptic. Electoralism, treating democratic elections as a problem to manage. The semantic slip revealed the authoritarian impulse at the technocratic heart. Financial markets noticed. The euro weakened 6 consecutive days. German bonds saw yield spikes. The DAX dropped 3.2% in one session. Major corporations quietly lobbied for de-escalation. Then came the turning point that nobody anticipated. On day 9 of the crisis, the European Court of Justice issued a preliminary ruling on a separate case involving Polish judicial reforms. The opinion, written by Judge Rosario Silva de la Puerta, contained language that inadvertently undermined von der Leyen's entire legal strategy against Weidel. The court stated explicitly that investigative powers conferred upon European institutions must respect the constitutional traditions common to member states and cannot bypass national judicial oversight mechanisms when fundamental rights are implicated. Legal experts across Europe immediately recognized the problem. If that principle applied to Poland, it applied to Germany. The EPO investigation into AfD, which von der Leyen had structured to circumvent German courts, was suddenly on shaky legal ground. Weidel's lawyers filed an emergency motion citing the ECJ opinion within hours. The commission found itself boxed in by its own judicial architecture. Panic set in at the Berlaymont. A mid-level legal service official described the atmosphere as apocalyptic. Von der Leyen's circle realized they'd triggered an uncontrollable chain reaction. The investigation couldn't proceed without German cooperation. But seeking cooperation meant submitting to Karlsruhe's authority, validating Weidel's sovereignty argument, and humiliating the Commission. Internal polling showed AfD support had surged 6 points since the investigation began. Weidel successfully framed herself as victim of an imperial Brussels fearing ordinary Germans. Every day strengthened her narrative. Von der Leyen attempted damage control on day 11 with a Deutsche Welle interview. Asked if she regretted initiating the investigation, she said, "The Commission acts in defense of European values. If defending those values creates controversy, that confirms their necessity." So tone-deaf that even allies winced. She'd admitted viewing democratic pushback as proof of correctness. The mentality of someone too long in institutional bubbles where dissent equals disloyalty. The final blow, a cross-party coalition of MEPs, including members from her own European People's Party, tabled a resolution demanding an independent inquiry into the Commission's use of investigative powers for political purposes. The parliament was effectively investigating the commission for investigating a political party. This isn't about defending Weidel's politics. This is about whether unelected technocrats can deploy investigative weapons to shape elections in sovereign states. If yes, European democracy is fiction. If no, von der Leyen's commission has committed institutional vandalism. The commission possesses enormous power, structural funds, regulatory authority, investigative mechanisms, infringement proceedings. When used transparently, these serve legitimate oversight. When deployed selectively against political opponents, they become authoritarian instruments. Von der Leyen failed to understand that credibility, once lost, cannot be recovered through decree. She transformed herself from rules arbiter into partisan actor. Every subsequent action would be viewed through that politicization lens. She contaminated the neutrality she claimed to defend. The irony is savage. Von der Leyen positioned herself as guardian of European values against populist threats. But her actions validated the core populist argument. Brussels is an unaccountable power structure manipulating democracy to preserve elite control. She didn't defeat the populists, she recruited for them. The crisis remains unresolved. Karlsruhe hearings are scheduled for next month. The EPO investigation is frozen. AfD continues rising in polls. The commission is paralyzed between retreat and escalation, both catastrophic. European capitals watch nervously. If von der Leyen backs down, national courts can veto EU investigations. If she pushes forward, she could fracture the entire European project. The United States is preparing contingency analyses for Germany reasserting sovereignty claims that undermine EU institutional authority. Trust in European institutions, already fragile after years of economic stagnation and migration crises, has taken another blow. When the Commission appears partisan rather than neutral, every future action will be questioned. The currency of institutional credibility has been debased. Von der Leyen confused procedural authority with political legitimacy. She assumed that because she could legally authorize an investigation, she should politically authorize one. The distinction between capability and wisdom collapsed. This is what happens when technocrats forget they serve democracy rather than manage it. The EU was built on the promise that pooled sovereignty would enhance national self-determination. When Brussels acts imperial rather than cooperative, the entire edifice becomes vulnerable. Von der Leyen didn't just attack allies.